one thing I really reflect on a lot, and one thing I say a lot, to be honest with you, is that if you look at mental health 20 years ago, they would have sort of seen mental health as being about like bipolar disorder and schizophrenia and maybe like major depression. Now we see mental health as about everyone. I think we need to do that with neurodiversity and see autism as part of that. I think then we can have a much more inclusive conversation about this in the workplace, because the reality is that there are some people who are autistic, but there are people across the whole workforce. Every single employee will have things that will enable them to succeed and thrive, and things that will act as a barrier towards that. And I think if we can get better at reflecting that diversity that exists within our workforce, then it doesn't really just benefit autistic people, it benefits everyone and it benefits the organisation. So we all need to get better at reflecting that and understanding that. So I think opening up that conversation through neurodiversity lens, I think, is extremely powerful. And then for doing that, beginning to test different solutions that can effectively work for different organisations and different organisation types as well, I think is really important. And what's really powering all of that at Autistica is a tool we're developing called the Neurodiversity Employers Index. And what we're trying to do through that is to really find a validated way of understanding whether different employers are making changes to their recruitment processes, their retention, the workplace culture, how they make things like reasonable adjustments, which really benefit autistic people, but also just benefit the workplace and the employer in terms of their approach to neurodiversity. And so a key thing we're doing is that sort of sits as the thing that we push out to employers, but underneath that, what we're doing is testing different workplace solutions through our research programs to try and understand, okay, what are the reasonable adjustments that autistic people and other neurodivergent people are commonly asking for? And what we discover for the research that we're doing is they're not particularly expensive, actually. They're not anything to be scared of. And a big barrier for employees is almost taking away that fear factor. And then, then also testing like, okay, so if we want to improve our recruitment processes, how do we do that? What works? What's an effective way of doing this that benefits the whole organisation? And so we've been testing different ways of asking interview questions and so on. How do you send out interview questions ahead of time? When is an interview a valuable approach to take and when is it not? So these are the things we're trying to do, and what we're trying to hopefully do through empowering employers is ultimately make it easier for employers to grasp this issue, to make it digestible, because I think that employers should be able to see this as an opportunity for them, but what they might not be able to see is where the solution is. And so that's where I think we can hopefully be helpful. So the key goal of the Neurodiversity Employers Index is to make sure that employers, in terms of their approach to neurodiversity, really changes in line with what we're finding and what the evidence is suggesting. So a key way in which we're trying to ensure the Neurodiversity Employers Index leads to real change in terms of employers' approach to neurodiversity, and in particular to groups of people who are particularly affected by that. So, for example, autistic people, is to recruit a range of organisations to help test and validate the index, to try and measure if it is really helping to make a real difference. So we've been really lucky. We've had some fantastic organisations. We've had almost 60 organisations so far who've signed up on a confidential basis in the first instance to trial the index, and we're still looking for more. We're hoping to get over the 100 mark, and that will really help us in terms of validating this tool. The second sort of other thing we're going to do is we're going to continually change and adapt the index to reflect the latest evidence. So continually looking at how we can validate it more effectively, understand it. A key thing, like you say, is getting people's employers buy-in. So we're going to have to work very, very hard on that. But I think a key thing is the research in terms of making sure it isn't just a tick box exercise. And a key thing the research can also do is make sure it's not a tick box exercise, while also making it a sustainable exercise for employers. We have to recognise that people will have, a key part of getting people to change is showing that the commitment associated with doing this is a sustainable commitment, a commitment that's in their interest as an organisation. So that's a key thing that we'll also be testing as well, which is like, how do we we create a tool which will help to deliver change, but will also be sustainable for different organizations. And part of that will be thinking about the scale of organizations. So big, large organizations have a huge capacity in some ways to develop change, but might have different barriers. Whereas a small organization, that employs 10 people, for example, will have limited capacity in some ways, but might be able to make changes more quickly. So it's about thinking about these issues and really testing that and thinking it through in a thorough way. If we can do that, and we can do that well, then it's huge opportunity for us to make a real difference to the environments that we create and employers approaching neurodiversity, and also in particular, which obviously we're very driven by autistic people, but the experiences that autistic people have in the workplace. So we're really excited by this. This is the driver, the Neurodiversity Index, of all the research that we are doing to test different solutions. And the index will help us to make sure that when we engage with employers, those changes are ultimately made. So at the moment, there's an online tool which people can sign up to. And then we use that as the basis at the moment for testing it. And that's being validated at the moment. It's quite early days in terms of its testing. So that's what we're developing at the moment. What we're hoping to do is to some extent automate the process. And that will hopefully, from our side, keep the resource level management sustainable in terms of its delivery. So we're sort of testing that at the moment and seeing where we need to do it. I think that the other key thing about the index is you go through this process, and it's not like it's a supportive process. So we're not like, you don't get to the end of it and then sort of sit on the naughty step like if you've not been doing all of the right things. Actually, what we say is like, you are like struggling here and here are the evidence-based solutions, and here are the changes you can make. We'll talk to you in a year and see how you're getting on. So it's meant to be a supportive process. So the whole idea is like, we get this is difficult for some people. We get that, we all struggle with these agendas sometimes. This is not too difficult to make changes in. So the whole idea is that we're supporting people. And also the other great thing about this index is it helps us to understand from an employer's perspective, where are they having particular difficulties as well. So it's also a feedback mechanism for us, because once we can understand that, then we can begin to implement changes.